And Craig thinks probably the first one was around 1965, and the second time you said I was listed in 1988, was it? Is that right?
1988. I don't know if you've been here in between those.
I don't either.
Well, Buffy, let me just read this from my book. Beverly Buffy Sainte-Marie, who met Peter Lafarge in 1963, would carry a similar message to the highest levels of the entertainment business. Born of Plains Cree heritage, Sainte-Marie would be inducted into the Juno Hall of Fame in 1994 and the Canadian Country Music Hall of Fame in 2009. She would also be designated an officer in the Order of Canada, that country's highest civilian honor. This complex young Indian girl is full of the arrogance of the very shy, a very Indian trait, wrote Peter Lafarge in the liner notes of her 1965 sophomore album, Many a Mile. Gentle with a wealth of compassion for the world and its people. And recently, Buffy received the Polaris Prize, which is a very, very high honor in Canada. Many people compete for it, and this year she won it, and the recipient of a prize of $50,000. So congratulations. What do those kind of awards mean to you?
Well, people usually concentrate on my Academy Award, so thank you for mentioning the things that have happened for me in Canada. In a way, in the first place, you don't compete for the Polaris Prize. What happens, I mean, to me, the reason why it's interesting to explain to audiences that somebody in the world actually gives money along with a plastic statue, because that's what most of them are. An Academy Award and a Golden Globe are real statues, but very often, you get a lucite statue. Very often you have to buy your own airplane ticket to the event. But the Polaris Prize is quite different in Canada. It has nothing to do with genre or airplay or sales. Therefore, it eliminates payola and record companies competing. And it's a huge jury of, I think, 200 jurists all across Canada in different fields of music. And it's only on the quality of the album. So my most recent album, Power in the Blood, won. It's not as though I won. The album itself won. No, what's cool, thank you, but what's cool about it is that all 10 people who become runners-up receive money prizes from the music industry. What? And each of the 9 runners-up receive $10,000. And the winner receives $50,000, but I never saw the check. Never got a penny, and here's why. No, I really want audiences to know this. The airline industry, the hotel industry, everything, because I think one guy at the top of the food chain has all the money and there aren't enough coins to feed everybody under it. It's becoming prohibitive for working musicians, for high school and college bands to travel to the boonies. You might be able to appear at a Holiday Inn down the street, but you can't bring your music to the boonies anymore. It's just too expensive. One airline charged me for my guitar and a suitcase. They charged me $1,034, or they wouldn't let me on the plane. So that's what's going on. So, and it's not only affecting the music industry, folks, it's also affecting college and high school sports. So in Australia, we've made a little bit of progress in, at least the airlines have to agree as to how much they can gouge you for, so that you can prepare ahead and know whether or not you even should show up at the airport. But something needs to be done in the airline industries, because they're passing on the owie to people who really need to be heard and seen, sports and musicians. So that's my commercial.
years ago when I was writing the book, the new folk music, we did an interview. And you pointed out to me back then, we talked about the diverse styles of music that you're able to write in. Talk a little bit about how those diverse styles converge into what you do.
Well, as Craig points out, when I was coming up, it was what they were calling the folk music era. And I graduated from the University of Massachusetts with a philosophy degree and a teacher's degree in 1962. And I went to Greenwich Village thinking I was going to go on to India to study really how music and spirituality or religion are, how they converge. And instead, I got very lucky in Greenwich Village singing the songs that I had been singing I've been writing them all my life and singing them in college at UMass. So I really had a sense of world music before I showed up in Greenwich Village. I was thrilled by the singing of Edith Piaf, who, the emotion of her voice would be carried into the song. And I had a real strong vibrato and didn't even really know it because I was there as a songwriter, not as a singer. So I wasn't paying much attention to how I was singing, and I think I was awful. Not just the vibrato, but I just was not listening to myself as a singer. And after my second and third album, I learned how to listen at the same time as present the song. Really, there was nobody presenting songs that I cared about. And in the music business, as in life in general, very often young people coming up, they copy whatever's making money last month, and that's what record companies want too. But I thought there was no sense in showing up if I was just going to do what everybody else was doing. So I really kind of felt obligated to give people something unique. So I wrote songs from like country that became country music hits, and songs that became pop music hits, but I didn't tell anybody that I wrote them because the folk police could get after you. And you wound up with these strange conversations about, is that folk music or is that not folk music? And I was never very concerned with whether it was or wasn't. But I was lucky enough to be around real folk singers like Joe Barnes and Pete Seeger and all. We were called, people who sang genuine folk music, songs that had lasted 200, 300, 400 years. And I sang a few of those, but most of them I had written. And I was in Australia a year and a half ago at a folk festival, and this Irish singer came up to me and she said, there's a real controversy in Ireland. Because in the literature of Irish music is a song called Johnny Be Fair. And somebody pointed out that
most singers are like a Volkswagen. I am more like a 747. I go longer, farther, stronger, and higher, combining rock and roll with the power of Queen's free singing. I invented power rock 40 years ago. And power in the blood is such a powerful, hard-beating album. Where did that power rock come from? How has it grown and evolved to where it is?
Well, it just makes sense. In the first place, I wanted to give audiences something unique, and one of the things that I knew about that most people did not know about was because of airplane tickets. I mean, I not only went to hundreds of reservations because I wanted to, but what got me there were hundreds of concerts in fancy places. So if I had a concert in Stockholm, I'd be up in the Arctic Circle with the Samis
whole idea of I don't know more, we were talking about Canada as opposed to the United States, and I don't know more because of the people that don't know it's a grassroots organization of women who got tired of all the BS that they're subject to, and are making a real stand. What is the difference between Canada and
Oh, there's a huge difference. For indigenous people, the farthest south people who worship it, it becomes very difficult. But on the other hand, when it comes to Native American music, it's very strong in Mexico and Peru and Ecuador, and in Canada, but not in the USA. So what I was trying to do in the very beginning, in giving people something unique, I wanted to bring them the Native American experience in ways that they could understand, because I'm not just some kind of pissed off Indian racist. I have a degree in Oriental philosophy from the University of Massachusetts, which is significant in that I had a lot of nice white people, real smart ones. So I knew from my own personal experience that there were a lot of people who, if they knew that Kintua Dam was about to decimate and move and bankrupt Aboriginal people while making a few contractors and politicians rich. I wrote Now the Buffalo song about that. My country, 'tis of thy people you're dying. It was the first time that the word genocide had been used in connection with what happens in North America to indigenous people. So I really felt as though if I thought that was going to be my contribution to non-Indian audiences, to kind of give them a little running board to step up to learn more, because a lot of people I knew did want to know that, and a lot of people did know that. But it's very different in Canada. In Canada, if you pick up any newspaper in Canada, there will be many, many, many stories about Aboriginal Canadians. It's not because they're their fist in the air and feather moving. Not because in the USA, if it bleeds, the media kind of goes for in the US these days. But because Aboriginal people all over the world are doing interesting things, and Canada is a different kind of country. I mean, the history of Canada and the history of the US is both very hard on indigenous people, but Canada is so big. Canada is so much bigger than the US, although many Americans don't know that. Oh, our neighbor to the north is a little skinny thing above Montana. Yeah. It's the second biggest country in the world, Canada. And there are a lot of Canadian Native musicians. In the 90s, we went to the Junos, which is the same as the Grammys in the US, and we founded the Music of Aboriginal Canada category. And this was good, because you get that not because people are feeling sorry for you or think you're cute or something. You have to have the numbers. You have to prove that you had enough musicians, singers, songwriters, studios, producers, record companies, and sales. You have to show that the rest of Canada is interested in the music, and sure enough, that was true. There's been a lot of Aboriginal musicians come forward. Real rock stars like Tribe Called Red, who were a hip-hop group, electronic dance group. They did 2 remixes of a song that I called Work. It's really hot. But, there are other people, great guitar players like Derek Miller, and, just right across Canada. And our traditional powwow groups are very well known, maybe not to the general public, but at least to each other. And a lot of Aboriginal people are able to make a little living locally, travel a little bit. They're always included in events like this one. And so, it's much more of a presence in Canada. And I wish it was so in the US, and maybe you guys will make it go.
You were born on the Deer Park.
Pipeline.
The First Nations were adopted very early on. What kind of changes did you have to go through in discovering that you were adopted and First Nations?
It's referred to sometimes as the big scoop. In Canada, like in the US,
We had many years of what's called residential boarding schools, and everybody in Canada is very familiar with this, but very few Americans are familiar with it. These were essentially, well, maybe not deliberately intended, at least written down intended. They were pedophile factories where Indian children were kidnapped in airplanes, in cars, any way they could. They were put into residential boarding schools that were run by people who'd been trained in the military. I mean, the most famous one in the U.S. is in Carlisle, run by the military. And, the idea was to, quote, take the Indian out of the man, right? And turn these poor little savages into white kids through the churches. And in Canada, we have what's called Truth and Reconciliation, which is a committee of highly educated, very knowledgeable judges who really looked into these tragedies and found out exactly what had gone on. And last year, the Truth and Reconciliation Committee came forward with their full report. And I mean, I'm not kidding. It's not just, oh, they cut their hair and wouldn't let them speak their language. Isn't that awful? No. There were cattle prods involved. There were electric chairs involved. There was a lot of, just pedophilia of all kinds. Indian agents ran a lot of them. Churches ran most of them. There have been apologies from the Episcopal Church and the Universalist Church. But they were true tragedies, just true genocidal tragedies that now are being addressed. So it can be done. It's a terrible, terrible subject, but you can make things better, and that's what Truth and Reconciliation is about.
Robert Robertson told me that his mom, he grew up in that time where it wasn't hip to be Native. And he was told, be proud, but don't let anyone know. What was it like when you were growing up, and how has it changed?
Well, Robbie is half Jewish, half Mohawk. And he was raised, mostly with his dad, with the Jewish side of the family. So he didn't learn too much about Mohawk people. And that is very often the case. Where I went to school, everybody thought the Indians were all dead. They told me that I couldn't be Indian because there weren't any more. Oh, there may be a few in Arizona, but there weren't any around here. Which was a crock. So it wasn't, Robbie is quite correct in saying that it was something that people were ashamed of. And adoption also was something that was kept private. Not so much always shame. There were a lot of reasons why people kept adoption quiet. So I was very excited when I think it was maybe third, fourth, fifth grade. We were going to the museum and we were going to see the Indians. Because in the U.S., there's a tradition in the fall, children usually study after the volcanoes and after the dinosaurs, you study the Indians, and it's Halloween. And then it's Thanksgiving, and so that's what I always call the moon of paper feather hats. You know those hats that some of you in my generation used to make, those paper feather hats, or feather bonnets. So anyway, they were going to take us to the Indian Museum, but they didn't take us to a cultural museum or to a music museum, or they took us to the Natural History Museum, and there were the Indians dead and stuffed alongside the dinosaurs. Yeah. So that's what people in my generation grew up with. Mind you, this was New England, where the Salem witch trials happened. Strange area of wonderful people with really weird history that goes back a long time. I mean, if your folks all came from California or so, there was a couple of 100 years in the very early American history where things were very strange, and so most of us did grow up in that kind of atmosphere, especially if you were adopted. So many of us grew up without our culture. I always wanted to know though. And my mom, my adopted mom, to her credit, she told me, don't believe what you see in the movies and what you read in books about Indians. She said, I don't know much about it. Although she herself was from a family where they were proud to be, or they said they were proud to be part Indian. They thought that they were Mi'kmaq, Canadian tribe. She said, someday when you grow up, you can go find out. So I always looked forward to that, and here I am.
Yeah.
Still trying to find out. I was readopted, by the way. I was taken back in Saskatchewan by a family who may or not be blood relatives when I was in my late teens. So I reconnected. So I'm lucky enough to have had two families. One a non-Indian family and the other a very Indian family.
Music has gone through a great evolution. Up until the late 50s, commercial music was this little 10 little Indians, or what makes a pale face red. And you were part of a group of people who started or pioneered stepping away from that and presenting more reality. Peter LaFarge before you, and you dedicated, now that the Buffalo's gone, to Peter. What do you remember of Peter, and did he have an influence on what you were doing?
He did have an influence in me that's kind of negative, though, because Peter was a big drinker, and I'm a teetotaler, and I kept away from him. He wrote a very, very nice tribute to me in Sing Out magazine that made a lot of people think he was my boyfriend. But Peter was a very macho alcoholic, and used a lot of drugs and carried a whip, and I only met him a couple of times. He was a good writer. He was somehow related to Oliver LaFarge. I believe he was adopted. Said he was Narragansett. He died quite young. So I can't really tell you a lot about Peter except through his music, because I didn't know him well. It appeared that I did, but no, I was scared of him. I never have hung around with, party boys and Waylon Jennings, I'll listen to and sing all day, but I'm scared of that kind of guy, so I didn't hang out. I was very much a loner. I was not a part of the, Joan Baez, Bob Dylan, Judy Collins, all had real strong managers, and I did not. I had a very nice manager named Herb Gard, who, by the way, is from Philadelphia. So if anybody knows her, please say I said hi. But I didn't have that strong management, and show business it's kind of like Donald Trump, it's a matter of pushing people at you. It's very aggressive on the business side. And I wasn't like that. I traveled around on a bus with a guitar, a pair of sneakers, a fancy dress, and some high heels in my suitcase, and I wasn't part of a group. I didn't have a band. I traveled alone. So I was very much a loner. I didn't go to the parties, and when everybody else was at the civil rights, events and photo ops, it was very much show business, and there was nobody covering the base of American Indian anything, and I just thought that was something that I could do. And the people who helped me to do that later on, when was it? 1977, I think it was. We held something called the Longest Walk. Dennis Banks led it. Dennis Banks from the American Indian Movement. And Sheldon Wolfchild, who's the father of my son. He's Mdewakanton Sioux from Minneapolis, from northern Minneapolis. And the people who helped us were Muhammad Ali, Stevie Wonder, Stokely Carmichael, Richie Havens, David Amram. So these were people who somehow had gotten wind that we needed help. And when Dick Gregory came to my reserve, he came to Pipelands much earlier, in the 60s. And when we flew off in a small plane, he was crying. He said, I thought I had seen poverty and hopelessness, but it really turned him inside out. So we did get some support from, but it didn't come from the folkies. No, it did not. It came from other areas of the U.S.
The big hit in the 60s, Universal Soldier, when Donovan recorded it. That was the second tune that Donovan recorded. He recorded Codine before that.
And a lot of people will still argue with me. They say, you didn't write Universal Soldier or Codine. Donovan wrote that. And so Donovan and I, a couple of years ago, we did a television kind of conversation, and three of us swapping songs. And sure enough, Donovan made it very clear that the only two songs of another songwriter he had ever recorded were Universal Soldier and Codine, which, but a lot of people thought Donovan wrote it because he was a singer of songs of conscience and meaning, and they just assumed, and his management never said different, so a lot of people used to give me a hard time on that.
You didn't really benefit so much from that big hit. You told me you wound up selling that song for $1.
Can you believe it? I was so green in Greenwich Village.
Yeah.
I mean, I had never met a businessman. I just graduated from college with a degree in philosophy, but I'd never met a businessman. I'd never met a lawyer. My family was just not of that businessy network. And I was singing at the Gaslight in Greenwich Village, a little downstairs coffee house. And the Highwaymen were there, and they wanted to record Universal Soldier. And they asked me who the publisher was, and I said, what's that? And a friend of Herb Gard's, Elmer Gordon, said, oh, I can help you with that, but I have to give you $1. And I sold the rights to Universal Soldier for $1 to Elmer Jared Gordon. And 10 years later, I bought it back from Elmer Gordon for $25,000, except they wouldn't give me the U.S. rights for Universal Soldier. So I still don't have the rights. So Donovan and Elmer made all the money. Say what?
You're not allowed to play it here anyway.
You're not allowed to play it.
If you hear it on the radio, give me a call.
Oh boy! Now but that was a good song because it doesn't. See, I do two things. I write real spontaneously, like a love song. Just shows up and you're singing it, and you know what it's about, and there it is. But a song like Universal Soldier or Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, something like that, I go after it like I went after my college degree. I mean, Universal Soldier is like a thesis that I wrote for some professor who did not like me in the first place and did not want me to write anything about that topic. And I was convinced that I could get an A out of the guy. So that's what Universal Soldier is. It's very cleverly written. It's very cleverly written before it involves the person who's listening, and the guy says, oops. And oops is me too. It's him and you and me. So Universal Soldier was, I write that kind of song too. And if you care about an issue and you're a songwriter, the freshness of an idea is very important. Write all that stuff down. Don't let the editor get in the way. But if you really need it to make sense, then you've got to put some extra diligence into it if you want it to make sense for generations, which Universal Soldier has done. Universal Soldier's been recorded in 16 languages, I think, and it's still being recorded, and it still makes sense. I wish it didn't.
So you're at this point really well known as a outspoken political writer, but you have this other side. You're speaking up for Native rights and Native struggle, and then the government.
But also Native smiles. That gets left out. People, how it's done, how Native American people are exploited and abused, and Nixon's